going to do something a little bit different today. Normally, I have a long, elaborate script, and I find all sorts of audio files and try and make these videos as high quality for you guys as I possibly can. But today's video is going to be much more laid back. I have no script here, and we're just going to be talking about something that I really love, which is Criterion. The Criterion Collection, if you don't know, very briefly, is a series of classic movies in all sorts of different genres. I mean, you'll see the range of the films that we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be going over the first 25 spines in the Criterion Collection. So essentially, just as a quick backstory, the Criterion Collection started releasing films in the late 1990s, and they're still releasing films today, and every time they release a new film, they assign it a spine number from 1 to, I think they're at like 1205 now, so there's a lot out there, but I watched the first 25 over the last 3 or 4 months, and I really enjoyed a lot of them. A lot of them I had already seen, but some of them I hadn't. And so today I'm going to be talking about all 25 and just make it a little bit more interesting. I'm not going to rank them, but I am going to put them on a tier list. So you'll see, this is basically a star tier list from 5 stars to 1 star, but I put different names on them just to make it a bit more exciting visually. But you get it. I don't need to keep explaining this. You understand how a tier list works. And we're just going to start very obviously from the first spine. Spine number 1, released in the late 1990s, but as pertinent now as it was then, as it was when it first came out. This is Grand Illusion. Grand Illusion is typically described as an anti-war film. It's essentially, it's kind of a prison escape movie. It's about a few guys who they get sent to a prisoner of war camp during World War I, and they plot to escape. And it's very straightforward in a way that I wasn't quite expecting. It was very humanist, which I really liked. Like a lot of the scenes here, they don't touch on, okay, how are we going to make this daring escape? Instead they focus much more on the small slices of life. Like how are these prisoners interacting? At one point, they're doing artworks together, and we get to see the art they did. It's very down to earth. A lot of realism, at least what I expect to be realism from 1930s, German prisoner of war camp. But I definitely don't fully connect with it. It's very much a slow burn, right? Every aspect of prison life is shown here, from the initial internment to the lengthy post-escape, which I didn't think was super necessary. I would have preferred just give me, a straightforward escape film, or even just like an anti-war film in general. But there was too much treading the line, I think, which let this be a bit disjointed. Anyway, next up, spine number 2, we are on a total classic, one of the most famous, acclaimed films of all time, Seven Samurai. I mean, I don't want to be redundant. I don't know what to say here. There's no hot takes. This is a complete masterclass on how to not only make a great film, but how to completely transcend the medium of film itself. There are very, very few movies out there that can transport you to their world as effectively as Seven Samurai does. Just to, add a little bit of my own commentary here, 2 things that I don't see mentioned as often about Seven Samurai is, 1, this is extremely accessible, right? I think it's 207 minutes, and it's black and white, and it's foreign, and so a lot of people are expecting, some sort of high art or something that they can't quite get into, but this is so entertaining. You'll turn this on, you'll be into it within the first 30 minutes, and you'll be sad when it's over. I guarantee you. I've seen this many, many times, and I never get tired of it. I think it's as famous as it is for a reason. It's just that good. Also, this is not high art, right? This is literally just an adventure movie. If you don't know, Seven Samurai is about a village which is under attack by some bandits, and so the villagers hire 7 samurai in order to defend their village from the bandits. And it's literally it's the story. I mean, Bug's Life is a remake of it, so it's been remade many times because the story is so universal and it's so easy to follow, even with the language barrier or whatever. The other thing I want to mention too is Toshiro Mifune, who plays one of the samurai. He gives a top 10 performance of all time across every actor's performance ever. I mean, it's so impressive. He's so good in this, and he does it too without like any like grand emotional like outbursts. There's like one, but I mean, he's comedic relief. Like I've never seen a comedic relief character be as effective as Mifune is here. He's so funny. He's electric, and he just goes so hard on this role. He really did not have to. But I mean, come on, this is Seven Samurai. It's going to the top tier. I'm not trying to shock anybody here. Number 3 is The Lady Vanishes, which is our first Alfred Hitchcock movie, first of many. Of course, he's in here a lot. But I saw this in theaters originally with my dad and my brother, which gave me a bit of nostalgia for it. I really do love this movie. This is a British Alfred Hitchcock film, and bar none, I mean, his most famous films are all his American ones. Of his British ones, it's really this or the 39 Steps that people talk about. But this is great. This is definitely my favorite of his British films. It's like the perfect blend of mystery and adventure. It's kind of like Tintin, The Adventures of Tintin. That's kind of how it reminds me. But it's so up my alley. It's really, it has it all. It's about a woman who she's on a train, and she meets an old woman named Miss Froy. And she takes a nap on the train, and when she wakes up, Miss Froy is not only missing, but everybody on the train claims she never existed at all. It's another story that's been remade a few times, but it just works so well here. There's some issues I have, like it's a little bit tonally jarring at times. It kind of shifts from like comedy in the beginning to mystery, and then it ends with action, which I don't think we needed the action. It's a little bit like, okay, here we are. I would have preferred, it would have been stronger if it was just a comedy, mystery, adventure. You don't need to add in a shootout, which is what this ends in. But I mean, still, this works on so many levels, and I love the vibes. Like, I love the train vibes. I love everything about this. This is so great. Okay, moving right along to Spine number 4, Ombr Record. This is another one I'd seen before. It's actually a while before we get to one that I hadn't seen. Not a while. Number 7, I think I hadn't seen before. But this is number 4, Ombr Record. It's a very personal film for Federico Fellini. It's kind of like if you've seen Roma by Cuarón, or there's a few other filmmakers who make like very personal stories of their childhood. And, these don't fully do it for me. I don't really connect with Fellini to begin with. I've never been a huge fan of, like, 8.5. But I am going to rewatch it for this challenge eventually, so maybe I'll connect with it more. This is essentially, like, a series of, like, vignettes. So there's no real story here. It's kind of just, here's a story about Uncle Tio in a tree, or a peacock in the snow. It's just, like, here's kids having fun with messing with the local hooligans. I don't know, whatever. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Basically, every 5 minutes is a different story, and it's that sort of like filmmaking style. It's too hit or miss to me. There's some segments that I love, like the Tio in the tree. That was a great segment. And there's a great funeral segment at the end. Like there's a few really, really strong segments, but there's also so many that are just bleh, boring. I don't want to say boring, but unlikable. A lot of unlikable characters doing unlikable things. And yeah, I mean, Fellini's a very competent filmmaker. The cinematography is great. I would say about half of this movie interests me, but the other half is just we're gonna put this in the meh tier. I'm not really saying what tiers I'm putting these in, but you can see if you're watching the video. Yeah, we're gonna put this in meh. It's just okay. It's fine. I don't hate it, but it doesn't quite connect with me. Number 5, I mean, The 400 Blows. This is another one that I mean, we're putting this straight in the top tier, and just a spoiler alert, there's not going to be many films that enter this top tier. You'll see, these might be the only 2. But man, The 400 Blows is just perfect. It's so great. It's maybe the single most essential piece of art house cinema out there. I mean, it's literally, it's similar to On Record. It's about a young boy and the way he sees the world. It follows Antoine Joannel. I'm not, the Criterion has a lot of foreign films, so I'm just letting you know I'm going to be butchering a lot of names here, but I'm going to try. But Antoine, he is the young boy of The 400 Blows, and it follows him in school and his parents that he has a very fractured relationship with. And it's so sad. It's so tragic. Like, it's really so sad. And the thing that I really appreciated about it is there's like a very intentional disconnect between the way that Antoine views his terrible situation and the way that we're supposed to view it. Like, we see it as horrible, but Antoine sees it as his life. Like, he doesn't look at it and pity himself. You know what I mean? Because he doesn't know anything different than the life where he's, berated by his parents and struggling in school and arrested, whatever. He's just a kid. And it's so phenomenal to me that simple like twist of that disconnect just elevates this so much higher. I mean, this also has the young boy that plays Antoine. This is one of the greatest child performances ever in film. This is a French New Wave film, which I don't like the French New Wave. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's pretentious, but this is not pretentious. Yeah, I mean, it's got inventive editing. It's like I said, stellar performances. Everybody's just fantastic. Wonderful script. I mean, this is genuinely one of the greatest films ever made. Hot take right there, I guess. But I think this is so great. One that I don't love quite as much is Spine 6, Beauty and the Beast. And again, look, one thing I love about these Criterion films is look at the range and genres and years and countries that all these films are. We're going from the French New Wave to another French film, but a fairy tale, Beauty and the Beast. This is in the collection, like a lot of things too, they're in the collection for a specific reason, right? They might not be the best film ever made, but they are important, they're significant, and Criterion feels you should watch them. So Beauty and the Beast is in the collection because it's technically like a marvel. The makeup on the Beast is extremely advanced, extremely ahead of its time. I mean, if you own the Blu-ray of this, there are so many special features that just delve into why this is so technically impressive. And I like that. I appreciate that. But when I'm looking to be entertained, it's a little bit lacking in those aspects. It's also very like operatic. Like, it's the type of movie that you almost feel like you should be seeing in a suit with, with valet moving your car somewhere. You know what I mean? And I guess maybe if I were seeing this in theaters and I was in a suit and I did have like a drink, maybe I'd really appreciate it more. But as it stands, the way that I watched it, which was just on my TV in my living room, it wasn't quite exactly what I had hoped for. And I'd seen this one a few times too, and it's never been my favorite. But I do love the story of the Beauty and the Beast, obviously, and it's fine. Another one that is also technically impressive but not quite super entertaining is Spine 7, which is A Night to Remember. This is not the first Titanic film, but it's one of the first that really like got the Titanic. It's several decades removed from the Titanic disaster, so we start to know a little bit more about what actually went wrong that day, and we're not really guessing anything. I don't want to compare this to the James Cameron version, which everybody compares it to just because, of course, everybody's seen the James Cameron version. But this takes a very different approach than that, right? James Cameron's movie is like an action blockbuster, whereas this is almost a very dry, like documentary style approach to the Titanic. It's very methodical. Like, we see how the crew of the Titanic reacts. Like, we see all facets of the crew, and how they all individually interact with, what went wrong. It is fairly dry though. Like I said, I appreciate it for being like very historically accurate. And it taught me things about the disaster that I didn't know, like the fact that there was another ship that could have responded and could have saved the Titanic, but they were very inept. But it was just fine. There's nothing really to hate here. It wasn't super long. It wasn't nearly as long as Cameron's version, but it was a little bit dry. Anyway, one that I wasn't a huge fan of really was Spine 8. Actually, Spine 8 and Spine 9 I'm going to talk about together, because sometimes Criterion too, they'll release 2 or 3 films as almost part of like a trilogy or a box set, and so it makes sense for me to talk about them all together. So Spine 8 and Spine 9 are The Killer and Hard Boiled, which are 2 Hong Kong like action samurai, not samurai, just Hong Kong action movies. And yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of like Quentin Tarantino, you're going to love these films. It's so obvious that Quentin Tarantino not only loves these films, but straight up just like rips them off in his own movies. There's so much of Pulp Fiction in these. And I understand why people really like them. It's very cheesy, very convoluted stories of heroism and, whatever. It's also like, it's very nostalgic. These are the like two of the first that I hadn't seen before, like watching this challenge, but they feel like movies I've seen before because they're very late 80s, early 90s, the type of movies that you'd watch like on repeat on VHS. For me, like The Fugitive with Harrison Ford or Die Hard, like this pulls a lot of the same feelings that I have for those films, which is a great thing. It really is. But they're too much. They really are. I think, Hard Boiled is like, I think it was like 130 minutes. It was they're too obsessed with morality, both of these films. Like they really get into the idea of, okay, you can't shoot someone with their back turned to you, we have to save the innocent, that sort of thing. And it's fine. They're very hyper stylized. They're very cool, they're not for me. They're very much for people who are really into like hyper masculine displays of violence. But I don't know, a lot of time, like the way that they treat violence is a little bit like flippant to me. Especially in Hard Boiled, there's a scene where there's like probably 100+ people, random civilians, who get murdered in cold blood. And I don't think, like, when I watch that, man, I hope the good guys get their revenge. I really just think like, wow, what a waste of human life. I mean, I don't think that's the way I'm supposed to react to these films, but it is. These are fine. Hard Boiled is a bit worse than The Killer. They're okay, but they're not quite my genre. That's the thing, too, with these Criterion movies. I understand a lot of these are not my genre. They're not my type of movie, but I tried very hard to go into absolutely every film with an open mind and an open heart and trying to take out of it what the film was trying to give me. I think that's the only way to do it. Criterion released these films. They gave it a spy number because they felt, okay, this is worth your time for some reason, and I want to try and figure out what that reason is, which means give each film my full attention span. If I'm not feeling it, stop it, start over a different day, whatever, right? And yeah, Spine 8 and 9, yeah, Killer, Hard Boiled wasn't quite for me, but I do appreciate their inclusion. Now we get to one that I had seen before and I loved. This is going to go straight into the love tier. Walkabout, Spine 10. This is just fantastic. Like, Walkabout is about a boy and a girl who their dad takes them on a picnic in the Australian outback, and he essentially tries to kill them before killing himself. And the boy and girl basically have to wander through the Australian outback to try and get home. And they meet an Aborigine boy who is on his own walkabout, which is a rite of passage for Aborigine Australians, where they basically have to try and survive in the wilderness. So it's very apparent what this film's message is, which is the idea of nature versus industrialization. I mean, it very much hits that over your head a lot. Like they're straight up just like, cross cuts between brick wall cities and, the walls of mountains and rocks. Like, come on. I understand what you're trying to do here, Nicholas Roeg, but it's a bit too much at times. But it's a very fundamental message. Like, no one's saying that that's not true, that our world has gone too far when it comes to industrialization. I'm very much a fan of nature. I love nature, and this rings true as much as it did now as it did in 1971 when it came out. This is also a beautiful movie. Like, the cinematography here, Nicholas Roeg, the director, he was a cinematographer before he was a director, and so you can totally see that in every shot of this film, every frame. It's just so pretty. I've never seen the Outback in person, right? And this really transports you there, which is great. There's also like a really great score, which really makes you want to go out and learn how to play the didgeridoo. It's just so good. I really do. This is one of the movies that I could go back to again and again. Mainly, honestly, just because I love, like, yeah, transport me to the Australian Outback, please. I love it. It's amazing. So yeah, this is another great one. I love so many of these films. So many good ones here. And next one, I mean, come on. One thing that I've kind of briefly touched on so far is that I rewatch movies a lot. If you go to my Letterboxd, you'll see I honestly might rewatch more than I watch new movies. And the reason that I do that is because of movies like The Seventh Seal, Spine 11. The Seventh Seal, I have seen this now 4 times, okay? And the reason I keep checking it out is because the first time, the second time, the third time, it didn't connect with me. And I'm like, this is one of the most acclaimed movies of all time, and yet it's not doing anything for me. But I don't know what it was. This 4th time, I saw what I was missing. I loved The Seventh Seal. I really connected with it this time. The production design, I mean, this is straight out of your local Renaissance fair. Like, it just looks so good. It's so in line with what I expected the Dark Ages to look like. It's incredible, right? The Seventh Seal is another one of those high art movies that a lot of people are like scared of because it's black and white and it's foreign and it's about death. But honestly, this is powerful. It's not hard to watch. It really isn't. It's short. I don't even think it's 90 minutes, but it's not pretentious. It's exciting. It's funny. I was surprised this time. I didn't realize how funny this movie was. But yeah, I just really connected with it this time. And I think, I don't know whether to put this in my top tier or my second tier. I think we're going to go in the second tier just because it did take me 4 tries to really appreciate it. Unlike these top 2 here. But I do think The Seventh Seal, it's one that I'll revisit again in the future, and I might connect with it more. A brief synopsis, it's about a guy who plays chess against the devil for his life, right? That's what he plays chess against death, like the Grim Reaper. Everybody always describes The Seventh Seal in that way, and that is a very small part of a very complex story. But you just gotta check it out. I mean, it's considered one of the greatest films of all time for a reason, and it's one of the best by Ingmar Bergman, it's Ingmar Bergman. And now to pivot completely to Spine 12, another example of how Criterion spines, they are all over the place thematically. Spine 12, the first American film, this is Spinal Tap. It's one of the first mockumentaries, which is like a fake documentary, but it's a comedy, and wow, this is so hilarious. This was witty. This was the first time I had seen this, but I'd heard so much about this Spinal Tap. I mean, I've referenced it in past videos on this channel just because it's so iconic. But it's even funnier than I thought it would be. Like, I watched this alone, which I think is maybe the way to watch it because so many of these jokes are so subtle, right? Because it's a mockumentary, it's like we're not getting a punchline and then wait, why oh, that was a joke, ha ha ha. No, it's very subtle. Someone will say something and you're like, did they just say that? And you've already missed 3 jokes while you're trying to figure out what they just said, right? It was so subtle, so funny. I really appreciated the Beatles references. I'm a huge Beatles fan. Definitely expect some Beatles videos in the future because I love the Beatles. And this took on all of their issues and their dysfunctionalities. It was hilarious, right? It was mockumentary. I mean, that might be the pinnacle of comedy to me. I love dry humor. I love grounded comedy. And honestly, this is the type of comedy you need to watch with by yourself, because if you watch with friends, you're going to miss so many throwaway lines. This was also, like I said, the first American movie released by Criterion, and that is a very inspired choice for the first American film. No Citizen Kane, no, I don't know, Wizard of Oz. Like, this was the first one. This is Spinal Tap. So I just thought that was funny. But we're going to follow it up with another American film, and quite possibly, definitely the most famous movie we've talked about so far. Maybe one of the most famous films that Criterion has ever released. Spine 13, The Silence of the Lambs. I mean, come on. Of course I had already seen The Silence of the Lambs many times. I don't know what to say about this that hasn't already been said. I mean, in terms of technical achievements, this excels in literally every department. Like the acting, writing, direction, cinematography, you get the picture. I do have a few minor issues that keep me from giving it the highest praise. We're going to put it in love, not, adore, but it's only small plot details and only things that I take issue with because I've seen this so many times. So that's one thing. I mean, these rankings, I'm giving you my thoughts on the films. The actual placement on the tier list, it doesn't really matter ultimately, because I'm going to tell you the good and the bad of these. If you want to watch it, go ahead and watch it. If you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, I'm not going to spoil it. You know who Hannibal Lecter is. You know who Clarice is. Just a minor plot issue I take issue with is Catherine is the senator's daughter. That's very convenient in my opinion, way too large of a coincidence. Very much, okay, this is going to propel the story forward because now Hannibal has a drive to help Clarice because he could potentially move to a different prison. I mean, it's way too convenient, I have to say. And there are other issues with it. I feel like I understand Silence of the Lambs. I get it. The story, Clarice backstory about freeing the lambs when she was a little girl. It's a little okay to me. I kind of wish the emotional through line of this was a little stronger. And I also don't love that it almost sets up a sequel at the end. Of course, this movie was a huge hit. I mean, it won so many Oscars and it was nominated for even more. But I'm not a huge fan of movies that are clearly setting up a sequel at the end. It's a little bit okay, well, I kind of want this to end a bit cleaner. But come on, don't come at me in the comments, please. I mean, Silence of the Lambs is Silence of the Lambs. It's one of the best films of the last 30 years, easily. Next up, we enter our first box set in the Criterion Collection. This is Spine 14, Spine 15, and Spine 16. And this is a trilogy of films called the Samurai Trilogy. So the first one is Samurai 1, Musashi Miyamoto. The second one is Samurai 2, Spine 15, Duel at Ichijoji Temple. And the third one is Spine 16, Samurai 3, Duel at Ganryu Island. Again, please forgive my pronunciation. But the first one, okay, going through these fairly quickly because it's a trilogy. First off, I want to say I think it's a little odd that this Samurai Trilogy in general was included, especially so early on in Criterion's run, because these are all samurai movies, so our second, third, and fourth samurai movies after Seven Samurai, and there are a lot of better samurai movies out there. I will say I liked these movies. In some cases, I loved certain aspects of them, but it was a weird choice, in my opinion, for such an early Spine entry to do something that felt so derivative, honestly, of Seven Samurai. However, these are in color, and I'm going to talk about the color cinematography on all three of these. They are so good. Okay, let's start with the first movie, right? I went into this expecting very little, right? But I went into it with an open mind, and I really did like this one. I probably loved this one. I think this was my favorite of the three. The story is nothing special, but it's very much the typical hero's journey, right? It is the birth of our samurai, Musashi Miyamoto. I mean, this is when we really see him go from a village, just a typical villageman, to a samurai warrior, right? And it is important. You need to watch these in order, which is good. But the visuals in this, they're the best visuals of the entire trilogy, honestly. There is a shot in this movie where the camera is attached to the bottom of a horse's head, and we follow a horse as it's galloping from the bottom of its head. That's great. There's another shot with a waterfall that is stunning as Musashi walks in front of the waterfall. It's so great. The color cinematography in this movie, that is probably why these films were included, to be honest. I mean, these were color films from the 50s, three movies all 3 years apart, so very short time frame we're looking at here, or actually 1 year apart, sorry. I will say, though, this first movie, the action was pretty lackluster, especially for a samurai movie. I wanted more. Luckily, the second and third movies had more action. Let's just jump to Spine 15 really quick. Spine 15, yeah, Samurai 2, it wasn't as strong as the first movie, but there was actually too much action here. So I just said the first one didn't have enough action. This one, basically, I must not have been the only person to complain about that, because they said, yeah, we're gonna make this basically almost 2 hours of just nonstop fighting. And this also suffers from what I call the 1 versus 100 issue, where one character has to fight 100 bad guys, and somehow they do it. Somehow the bad guys all take turns. They all wait until the hero catches their breath, and 1 or 2 goes down, and then 1 or 2 goes in, 1 or 2 goes in, 3 go in. Ooh, it's ridiculous. There are 100 people fighting our lead here, Toshiro Mifune, by the way, same guy from Seven Samurai, and they could have got him. I mean, come on now, it was ridiculous. But the other thing I liked about the second movie is the sets. The sets in all three of these are very clearly on sound stages, so it kind of gives the movie almost a Wizard of Oz feel, where you can tell this is on a sound stage, but it's meant to be an exterior. It's meant to be, flower fields, even though it's clearly just a set. And I really like that feeling. It makes movies feel dreamy. It reminds me of plays that I was in as a kid. And so these sets feel very lived in. They feel very, very square, very, very, like, what's the word? I guess exact, right? That everything on this set is controlled. I don't know. That's just me. People might actually call that a knock on the film because it feels maybe too phony. But anyway, I like that, and I'm rambling. Let me just jump to the third movie. Duel at Ganryu Island. This was maybe the weakest. I don't know. No, this is probably the second best. It was too concerned with honor. It's the same issue I had with the Hong Kong action films earlier. I don't need to see issues of honor. Like, should I stab this guy because his back is turned to me? Like, come on now. There's a duel in this film. The act of the duel is silly in my opinion. I understand it. It's a cultural thing, but if someone says, I want to duel you, you're going to fight to the death. Like, no, I'm going to decline that duel, even if it means shame on my family. I don't know. There's also some wasted potential in these characters. This franchise is fine. It's good. We're going to put these in the good. We're going to put these in meh. If I was ranking the whole trilogy, I would say good. But as an individual entry, it's just fine. It's repetitive. It was the third one. I was getting a little tired at this point. I think this would have benefited as a duology, but let me keep going because I'm just rambling. Now let's do Spine 17, which is... This is a film that is probably the most notorious of all 1,200 spines in Criterion. Like, this is the spine that people talk about when they say, what is the most out there spine that Criterion has ever released? This is Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom. It's bad. I'm sorry. This movie is so disturbing and shocking for the sake of being disturbing and shocking, and it never felt like anything more than just like potty humor. Like, I don't know. Like, okay, let me say the only good thing I liked about this. Okay, set design was great. It takes place in a mansion in the Italian vineyard, fields, and the set design was fantastic, right? But everything else, okay, the director, Pasolini, he seemed so uninterested in the victims. I actually got into an argument on Letterboxd with someone when I reviewed this, but I tried not to watch this, okay, under the guise of, is this disturbing, right? I wanted to see, because everybody talks, this is disturbing. I wanted to see, is this good, right? And there are a lot of issues I have with it, right? There is a complete disregard for the victims and almost a sympathy for the abusers in this movie. I know I'm being so vague, but essentially this movie is a critique on fascism, and it's like, okay, we get it. I know fascism bad. Like, we heard fascism bad in Ombr Record too. It's the same exact message. But it's about a group of high officials, presidents, government, who they take these teenagers, they kidnap them, and then they torture them for 120 days straight. And we should be sympathizing with the victims, but I almost feel like Pasolini really wants us to sympathize with the abusers, and it's such a terrible way of looking at this story. I don't understand why. Like, our victims are mostly unnamed, okay? Their escape attempts are not shown. Their cries are not heard. We don't see any of that, okay? Pasolini is so uninterested in all of that. And for every moment that we could be spending characterizing our victims, we learn more about the abusers. Like, we see all intricacies of their lives, and they're not shown as bad people. We only see them as bad because we know that torturing someone is bad. It's our own moral compass. But they're not depicted with any ounce of subjectivity. And their lives are explored way too much. I didn't want to see all of this, but perhaps like Pasolini is attempting to tell some deeper message, but it was just one of the most baffling decisions I've ever seen in a movie. And I think it turned an average story into one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Like, I walked away feeling nothing other than numb, like, numb and upset watching these teenagers getting tortured for 2 hours. And Pasolini, the director, he was murdered for some of his decisions in his personal life. He was not a good guy. he was an abuser. It's very well documented that he was a terrible person. So I don't think it's a leap of logic to assume that this satire on fascism is not that at all. It's really just an abuser attempting to abuse, on screen. I don't know. It was too much. I could not get into this at all. Okay, Spine 18, I think, The Naked Kiss. This was a noir movie. It's a much lighter note here. This was great. Like Samuel Fuller, the director, he was always a solid 10 to 15 years ahead of all of his contemporaries. This movie, honestly, I think a lot of his films struggle to remain relevant now. Like, he's not one of the great American directors, but that's because his movies were not like representative of the time they were released. He doesn't have a Citizen Kane or Vertigo. Maybe Shock Corridor, which is the next movie, is his most famous. But The Naked Kiss was really good. I had never seen this before, but it's about essentially a prostitute who moves to a new town, and she is about to get married, but she finds out something shocking about her soon-to-be husband. And honestly, I don't understand how Samuel Fuller got away with some of the stuff he got away with. This movie, it's within the Hays Code, yet it is so, like, it gets away with saying so much. It's really crazy how much they could get away with here. The subject matter is so dark, but it's a good dark. It's not like Salo where you want to take a shower afterwards. And also, there's a scene at a children's hospital. There's a lot of scenes at children's hospital, and the kids there are so cute. I loved it, and they're singing in some points, and it's like, after watching Salo, I was just like, yes, please give me the scene of these bedridden children singing, nursery rhymes as they go to bed. It was very sweet. Grant, he was never that interesting of a character to me. That was my biggest issue with it. We're just gonna put this, I think, in good. But I mean, come on, this was so refreshing, honestly. This also was followed by Spine 19, which was Shock Corridor, which is another Samuel Fuller movie. It's the one that I was just mentioning as probably his most well-regarded movie, and the one that I had actually seen before. This is great. Like, this one I definitely prefer. It's been my favorite Samuel Fuller movie for a while. But, I mean, it's 100 minutes. It's so breezy. It's so fast. And it says so much. Like, we get statements on race relations, the justice system, women's rights, the role of hospitals and rehabilitation. And it's also told in the package of, like, a genuinely thrilling and compelling movie. This is about Johnny Barrett. He's a reporter. He's desperate to win the Pulitzer Prize, and so he'll literally go to any length to get it, including faking insanity to enter a mental institution as a patient. So he wants to crack a murder case that was committed there. I wish the film relied less on voiceover. There's a lot of voiceover narration, which is probably my only flaw with it, but the ending is one of the best you'll ever see in a thriller, and the color photography in a black and white movie it's not color for the sake of having a few color shots. It is striking. It makes sense why there's color in these scenes, and it was great. Definitely check this out. Okay, Spine 20. We're getting there. I don't know how many minutes we're at, but I'm hoping we're not going to hit an hour here. That would be too long. Sid and Nancy is a biopic about Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen. Sid Vicious was the bassist for the band The Sex Pistols, and Nancy Spungen was his girlfriend. And I knew nothing about them. I knew the name The Sex Pistols. I had never heard any of their music. I'm not sure I still know any of their music, even after watching this. But I don't love biopics in general, so I wasn't expecting much here. It was good, though. This was another one where, like, I didn't love it when I first watched it, but the more I sit with it, honestly, this was good, verging on great, and I definitely need to check this out again, like I did Seventh Seal. I kept checking it out again and again, and I loved it now. This is one that I think if I watched it a few more times, I'd really love it. Sid Vicious and Nancy, they have a highly tumultuous relationship. If you don't like seeing, like, spousal abuse, I would not watch this. I found both of them to be very thoroughly unlikable. Like, Sid basically runs around for half of this just being a degenerate. Like, he just does the most horrible things, and you're like, okay, why am I watching this? But the ending, again, I didn't know anything about their story. I'm sure if you know the story of Sid Vicious, you know exactly what happens, but I was shocked. It was a huge turn of events that I was not expecting, and I won't spoil it because if you don't know, that's probably the only way to watch this, in my opinion. But if you're a member of the punk rock scene, like of the early 1980s, you would love this. I mean, this just depicts that scene with so much love and care for such, a group of outcasts in society. It really was interesting. Like, and this is why I love the Criterion Collection and why I love this challenge. It's because I'm seeing so many different lifestyles, so many different countries, so many different time periods, and I'm seeing it all with such care in most cases. This was honestly really good. I'm glad that Criterion included it. Unfortunately, it was followed by one that I didn't like. Probably this might be the first out and out horror in the Criterion Collection. Dead Ringers, Spine 21. It's a David Cronenberg movie, but it is a horror movie that deals with the idea, twins are pretty scary, aren't they? And I'm a twin, right? I think I've mentioned that before, and I don't do twin movies. They are all done with such little care and such little affection for twins. It basically it diminishes twins to either a joke or creepy. I feel like writing twins is so difficult. I understand, but there's only so much I can take of one twin having just two twins. I mean, to be fair, this does. There, like, one thing I will say that is good here is Jeremy Irons plays both of the twins, and I understand which twin he is in each scene, even though we're not explicitly told which twin he is. That's good. That's good writing. But I still couldn't get over the fact that the main horror of this is just based on the idea that twins are connected physiologically, and they're basically dependent on each other to survive. Like, I didn't really appreciate that mindset, especially because it's not like this is body horror like David Cronenberg is known for. I mean, this is just twins are dependent on each other, and when one feels something, the other one feels it. It's just, come on, like, really, I didn't find that scary. I guess I'll say, like, I'm not gonna hate on Cronenberg or people who like this movie because they find that scary, but I didn't find it scary. So I don't know what I'm supposed to take from this. I really did like all the references to Chang and Eng Bunker, though. They're two of my all-time favorite historical figures, the first Siamese twins. But I wish Cronenberg just made a film on them, instead of two non-Siamese twins who basically idolized the Bunkers. This was a pretty big misfire for me. So, it was a shame, unfortunately. I wanted more out of this, especially because it was the first horror film. And it was followed by another one that was okay. One that I wanted more from. Summertime, which is a David Lean movie. Is this the first David Lean movie? Yeah, it is, but it's going to be followed by a lot. He is the director of Lawrence of Arabia and a lot of other great, fantastic movies. Brief Encounter is one of my favorite movies ever made. And David Lean, I mean, Summertime, it was just fine, but he is honestly becoming sneakily one of my favorite directors. Like, he is remarkably consistent. Even his less regarded films like this are charming and entertaining. I mean, this is about Katharine Hepburn. She's a school teacher who's hoping to find herself in Venice, Italy. It's very straightforward. It's like Under the Tuscan Sun, if you've ever seen that. It's just a woman going to the Italian countryside in the summer, falling in love with the people, falling in love with the culture, falling in love with everything there is to fall in love in Italy. And that's very heartwarming. I'm not a cold soul, I really appreciated this. Sometimes I need movies like this, right? This was straightforward. There was no twists and turns really in the plot, at least no major ones. But honestly, it was a little dry at times. But I'm only gonna hate on it so much. This has to be good. I mean, there's no way I could call this just mad. Like, this is in color photography, right, in the 1950s. So it's almost like a travelogue, like, to see what Italy looked like in color in the 1950s, a time that is now completely lost, right? Other than what is filmed like this. And then Hepburn, of course, she delivers a powerhouse performance. Like, she's genuinely, I mean, she's maybe the best to ever do it. Like, best actor or actress, bar none. Like, she is so great in everything. I mean, it's Katharine Hepburn, the most Oscars for any actor or actress of all time. So Summertime was good. I liked it. We're getting now down to the wire. 3 more to go. If you still made it to this, I not only appreciate it, but I'm also shocked. I don't know if I could listen to someone ramble for 45 minutes. But if you are interested, in theory, if this does well and if people like what I have to say and they argue with me in the comments, which I am looking forward to, I could do this again with spines 26 through 50 or 51 through 75. in theory, I could do it all the way to spines 1200 through 1225. By the time I get there, there's probably going to be 2,000 spines. But just let me know. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if you want more. At the very least, these first 25 spines were so fun to go through. So I'm grateful that you're still listening to me. Spine 23, just to keep going, was RoboCop, which is, I just said that very nonchalantly. But yeah, RoboCop is in the Criterion Collection. Not really sure why. I don't know. It's very 80s, and that's both its biggest plus and also its biggest flaw. Like, if you want an 80s movie, yeah, check this out, or check out The Lost Boys, but if you want anything that still holds up, stay away as far as I'm concerned. Like, this was, the good was this was effortlessly cool. Like, I want to be RoboCop now. This was shot super well too for an action film. Action films can be shot either very poorly, where you have no idea who's shooting who, or they can be shot very well, which is just, I understand where the bad guy is, where the good guy is in relation to each other, and who's firing that bullet. I was never left confused by like a quick cut. And honestly, the best part of this was probably the cinematography. I'll give the cinematographer a shout out by name, because I usually am bad with that. But his name was Jost Vacano, and he knows how to film gunplay. Like, he if he hasn't done another action movie with guns, he totally should, because this is shot so well. The story I could give or take. The satire, it's basically, corrupt police corrupting, of course, inevitable, whatever. And it also it satirizes news. Like, basically the news are, the news people they love violence because it is shocking and it brings in ratings. It's all very like, oh, I'm 14 years old and I just learned that the news people aren't all in it for, anything other than ratings. Like, it's very surface level satire is what I'm getting at. But honestly, it's fine. And this gave me all I want from an action movie, which is just great action. It's not anywhere near the top of these movies, but it's not bad either. Luckily, we're going to end it almost on in a fantastic note. Spine 24 is the second Akira Kurosawa movie after Seven Samurai, and arguably this movie is nearly as good as Seven Samurai. It is high and low, which on a different day might be in this top tier, but we're going to put it in the second tier for now. But this has always been one of my favorite Akira Kurosawa movies. I will say, just to add a little bit of interesting note here, this was the first time that I had watched this since seeing Parasite in 2019. And I know that Bong Joon-ho, the director of Parasite, has always said that this is one of his biggest influences, especially on Parasite. But now, having seen that, I realize they are shockingly similar. Like, this is not a knock on Parasite, which is also in the Criterion Collection, by the way. But, I mean, these movies, they are almost remakes. Parasite is almost a remake of this. It's about the rich versus the poor, and about a big mansion on a hill, and it's about a guy who his son is kidnapped and he has to pay the ransom, but actually it's not his son, it's the son of his chauffeur. And so will he pay the ransom? And then after the first hour, which is where that's the storyline, the second hour becomes a procedural of detectives trying to solve who were the kidnappers, and what did they do with the little boy. Both halves are fantastic, and I mean, this is just one of the strongest procedurals ever in the crime genre. Like, if you like, I don't know, Prisoners or any other like great thriller, Zodiac's a great one. If you like movies like that, they all owe so much to High and Low. Like, Akira Kurosawa just pumped out masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece, and you're just like, how did he do this? Probably the best director of all time. But we're gonna end this off with Spine 25. Alphaville, which is directed by Jean-Luc Godard, one of my least favorite filmmakers, without question. And yeah, this one, I've always struggled with his movies. This one was more conventional than his other works. Like, the narrative was not cohesive at all, but I still understood the broad strokes of what he was going for here. And this is basically 1984, the story of 1984. I got that. Sometimes when I watch a Godard movie, I didn't even understand what I just watched, But I was researching this after I finished, and Godard literally reiterated in interviews that his goal here in making this was he was mad that the audience of his previous movie liked him too much. They gave him too much credit. So he wanted the audience to distrust him and to hate him. He doesn't want the audience to like him. I don't understand that sentiment at all. It's the same sentiment that like Gaspar Noé has. I don't get it. To me, like, that idea comes from a big place of arrogance where a director wants their films and their names to be entwined in conversation. So basically, you can't review a Godard movie without mentioning Godard by name. That's very arrogant, in my opinion. And there are two ways to achieve that. One is you could be a visionary like Akira Kurosawa with unique ways to tell a story and genuine artistry. Or two, you could go the Godard route, which is you could force yourself into the conversation by deliberately fighting against convention of what a movie should be, and deliberately fighting against technique of how you're supposed to film a movie, and then you basically just choose controversy over critical acclaim. Godard basically, he's just radical, right? And he thrives on controversy, and it's something that I just don't like. It's something I don't connect with. I don't want to call him a bad filmmaker, but I just don't like these movies that basically beg like hatred over apathy. So, unfortunately for Godard, ironically, my thoughts on Alphaville are meh, which is probably what he would hate more than anything. He'd rather me hate this or love this, but I'm just gonna put it right there and forget that I ever watched it. But that's it. That's 25 spines down. In theory, thousands to go if I keep this up. If you like it, please let me know. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know, what type of content you want to see on this channel. I'm so glad we keep growing the way we're going. And I'm really excited for season 2 next year, 2024. There's going to be a lot of great videos coming out. But let me know what you're excited for, what you want to see, what you hope to see, and what you even think this channel is about. Because I talk about everything. Like, there are so many different videos about completely different genres, eras, types of videos. Like, this is so casual, and there's some that are video essays. So let me know what you like from this channel and what you expect from this channel. And thank you if you made it here. Thank you for watching 52 minutes of me just yapping. I appreciate it. I hope to see you in the next one. But at least until then, I'll see you at the movies.